What's happening, everyone? Michael Olivas here. I asked my future scheduled guests to adapt their advice and responses to current times. This is a COVID-19 special edition where I will ask entrepreneurs how this current epidemic is affecting their business and life and what their advice is for you. I get it, Life Nation. I'm not just a podcast host. I'm an entrepreneur, just like you. My companies are having to pivot and innovate just to stay afloat, and I'm hearing it from guests and colleagues alike. Stay motivated, refocus, and trust me that those companies and individuals who truly strategize to get through this will flourish when it inevitably comes to an end.
You're listening to the Business and Life Podcast, where 7 days a week, proven entrepreneurs share their success stories, failures, and give you true value on how you can build a great business and an awesome life. With your host, Mike Olivas.
What's shaking, guys? Today we're chatting with Matthew Pollard. Matthew is responsible for 5 multi-million-dollar business success stories in his home country of Australia, all before the age of 30. His humble beginnings and adversities he faced, of course, and his epic rise to success are inspirational stories on how anyone with the right motivation and the strategies can achieve anything they set their mind to. Today, he's a best-selling author whose book, The Introvert's Edge, has received endorsements from Harvard, Princeton, Neil Patel, and Marshall Goldsmith, just to name a few. He's been featured in Fox, NBC, Fortune, Forbes, Inc., Entrepreneur, and CEO. And if that wasn't enough, he's also the founder of Small Business Festival, which Inc. has named top 3 national conferences for small businesses. All right, Matthew, welcome to the show.
Man, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for being on. So tell our listeners something interesting about yourself and also where you're calling in from today.
Well, I'm actually calling, though it probably doesn't sound like it, I'm calling in from North Carolina. So I live stateside now. Something interesting about myself, I guess that it's the fact that I'm an Australian living in the United States, but also I'm an introvert that happens to be one of the leading sales leaders in the world. So, that's kind of seems to be an oxymoron for a lot of people. So, it's an interesting topic.
So why did you choose North Carolina?
It happened mainly my wife's decision. I'd like to say I was part of the decision in total, but what actually happened was in 2013, I traveled the world for a year and I found this amazing city called Austin, Texas. And then I found this amazing girl and the two brought me to Austin. So I spent a few years in Austin building my brand. I built 5 multi-million-dollar businesses from the ground up in Australia and, wanted to try my hand at something, in a bigger economy. And this was well before, I didn't even know how to change the word "the" to the word "they" on a website back then. So, I didn't know that I could dominate online in America without even leaving. So, for 4 years, I built my brand in Austin, Texas. And then before we got married, it became, I was traveling so much. I speak all over the world. And it became more about where my wife wanted to live than where I wanted to live. And in truth, I speak in a lot of concrete jungles. So it's really nice to come to a place. I feel like I'm a holiday camp every time I come to North Carolina. I go for, especially right now when we're in lock-in for coronavirus, I go for a 5-mile run every morning through the trails. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful there. No, I absolutely agree. I think North Carolina is awesome. I think you definitely chose well. Give our listeners a little bit more about what your company does.
Sure. So, predominantly my major focus is helping introverted service providers obtain rapid growth. More often than not, service providers in general, they have amazing functional skills, but predominantly their entire life is spent in this hamster wheel of hustling to find clients, setting themselves apart and trying to make the sale, all while they pretty much know that the only thing their customers care about is price. So predominantly what I spend my time doing is helping them understand that's actually not what they care about. But if you don't give them any other option, and if you're seen as a commodity, just like everybody else in your industry, well, why wouldn't they make a price decision, right? They're smart business people, right? Or they're smart consumers. However, people these days are actively looking for messages that they identify with, and for that, they'll pay a premium. So I help predominantly introverted service providers realize that if they just step outside the scope of their amazing functional skill and focus on 3 predominant things, then they can create a rapid growth business around what they love to do every day.
That's a really specific niche. I think the initial word, right? Introverted service providers, which we talk about all the time on the show. I think we want to find that niche and understand why that became your niche. Was that specifically because you're you were an introverted, service provider in your businesses?
Well, obviously I was incredibly introverted. I mean, my backstory is that, I had this thing called Erlen syndrome, which basically meant I had a reading speed of a sixth grader in late high school.
Oh, wow.
And, I got diagnosed with this when I was 16, which basically means I put on this pair of colored lenses and magically I can learn to read. Now, it didn't mean I could read like everybody else. It means I could start the process of reading. And so for 2 years, I hustled and hustled to study at school to get good grades to finish high school. And I got into the top 20% of my state, but it took everything that I had. I was exhausted. So my family and I all agreed that I was going to take a year off to find myself. I mean, I'm sure lots of people listening at home probably have kids that have done that. But my father broke his back for 80 hours a week. There was no way I was going to be able to sit on the couch and watch Oprah. And also, we didn't have the money for me to travel Europe. So I took a job at a real estate agency. And when I say that, everyone's like, oh, yeah, he was the guy out front selling. I wasn't. I was the guy in the back office with a look on my face saying, don't speak to me. I'm here to find myself, right? I was just doing that. Well, I lost my job 3 weeks in, like literally, but just before Christmas, like head office decided to close down that premise. I was out of a job. And the only jobs I could find were these things called commission-only sales roles, which was terrifying for me. But the truth was that it was the only job I could get. So I applied. And luckily enough, I applied for 3 jobs. I got all 3. Turns out they hire everyone. That's just commission only. And my manager actually had this saying, we throw mud up against the wall and see what sticks, which sounds fun until you're the mud.
Yeah.
So day one, I went out and, after 5 days product training and not a single second of sales training, I went out into the field and I went to this place called Sydney Road, which is like 1,000 doors on each side in Melbourne, Australia. And there are all these little junk stores. And I'm like, well, at least when I get turned down, I won't have far to walk. I go to take my walk into the first door and then I realize I don't actually know what to say. So I begrudgingly walk in anyway. And I was politely, luckily enough, told to leave. And, the next door I was less politely told to leave. Then I was sworn at. Then I was told to get, my favorite was always go get a real job though. I mean,
of course.
The only job that I could get, right? So door after door, this happened until my 93rd door where I made my first sale. I made about $70. And I remember I was ecstatic for about 45 seconds.
Boom.
Then I had my realization for the day, my second realization, I got to do this again tomorrow, right? So this is not okay. And I think a lot of people listening probably have these defining moments where, especially in a lot of situations, the fight or flight mechanism comes in. And it's like, I'm either going to fight through this, but with sales, people think it's a natural ability. So their fight is, I'm just going to hustle. I'm going to grind it out, which is nuts. Or what 19 of the 20 people in my training group did within 3 days, they quit and they didn't come back. Well, I decided that I was going to be responsible for my own destiny. And I decided that sales had to be a system because if it wasn't, my life was going to suck. So day after day, I started to get better by looking for educational material. And after a couple of days, it was really easy to find it. I discovered this. I mean, I couldn't read a book like a Brian Tracy or a Zig Ziglar. It would have taken me a year to read that with my reading speed. But literally, I found YouTube at that time. And surprisingly, this was before podcasts, right? But there's a lot more on YouTube than just cat videos, which blows people away still today. But day after day, I watched 8 hours worth of YouTube videos to perfect the art of selling, by typing in, firstly, sales system, and then focusing on each step. Then I would go out in the field for 8 hours, and practice what I learned. Well, day after day, it would get better. It'd be like 75 doors, then it would be 48 doors, then it'd be 36 doors, and then, 18 doors, and then 9, and then 3. 6 weeks in, my manager pulls me in. He's like, Matt, we're a little bit blown away by this, but we just printed out the national sales figures, and it turns out you're the number 1 salesperson in the company. Now, I was the quiet guy. Like, we used to hand in our paperwork downstairs. This was the largest sales and marketing company in the Southern Hemisphere. Like, all the boisterous people were talking about how hard it was getting. No one knew who I was because I just handed the paperwork in downstairs and no one paid attention to me. But the key of this is I went from scared to sell to teaching hundreds how to do it. I mean, they promoted me to management. By the way, I sucked at that too. Like 20 people that I got given all quit within the space of, literally days.
Sure.
But I learned to manage, got better at that. I got promoted 7 times. Fast forward to now, I mean, my book, The Introvert's Edge, is now listed as the number 2 book ever written for introverts and one of the best books ever written in the world of sales.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on the successes. And I think being able to break things down and show other people how to break it down on where your time goes. And I think that's what people start getting obsessed, not with sales, but also with what creates true productivity. Right. And I think that, I resonate with the YouTube story for sure. When I do podcasts or interviews, a lot of times I say the exact same thing. When people, how did you learn? I was like, YouTube was my MBA. YouTube was my entrepreneurship journey. I just learned by watching, implementing. So if you're out there and you're just starting out, it's such a no-brainer. There's so much free content out there. You don't even need Audible yet, right? Which obviously helps me a ton to be able to get through books a lot, but definitely YouTube, learning the content that's out there and implementing obviously is definitely even more, of course, important than just learning and watching. Hey, given our current situation right now, Matthew, with COVID-19 and the outbreak and what's happening across the country, can you share with us on how this has affected your business?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so there are a couple of things to that. If I had my backstory is, as I said, I built successful businesses, but they're all bricks and mortar, direct marketing, telemarketers, retail stores. If I was still in that situation right now, I'm not sure where I would be. But in 2014, I made a decision when I moved to the US, even though I said that I wanted to build a business in a bigger market, I had this realization that if I ever want to go home and visit my family, I can't have bricks and mortar businesses with, business that's employing hundreds of staff every year. So it was just going to be too stressful. So I built an online business, and I didn't know how to change the word da to the word day on a website, but I became a student for 2 months and synthesized it with what I knew about online and offline marketing. And what I realized is there are so many, if you've got the right message, and what I mean is, not commoditizing yourself like, I'm a ghostwriter, or I'm an accountant, or I'm a copywriter, because people then go, oh, great, how much do you charge? I mean, we've all been down to networking events where, people say, oh, what is it you do? Oh, I'm a business coach. Oh, how much do you charge? Well, that's awkward. Or they go, oh, I've got a business coach, or I had one, it didn't go so well. Well, that's awkward. But that's how networking normally is, right? But if you get your message rock solid, to the point where people are excited and inspired to want to know more, you understand your niche and you've identified them as willing and wanting to buy clients, and you create great stories that are designed to educate and inspire while positioning you as the only logical choice to work with. Once you've validated that out in the real world, in truth, you can build it online. And the great thing about the online world now is you can use technology, psychology, and strategy to get your ideal clients to chase you in a lot of ways. So, I mean, I used to have a telemarketing team of 20 and a sales team of 20. Now, all of those artifacts are pretty much automated. And what's interesting is we don't even spend $1 on advertising, and we're inundated with people that are reaching out to us and, and chasing us in a lot of ways. Now, how has it affected me? Well, obviously, with the fact that my message and my niche is rock solid and all of that is automated, well, the world's gone online in a lot more than they ever have. Yeah. So we're actually, our subscriber ratio is 3x in the last, 2 weeks, right? Okay. So because of that, because people want access, I mean, I give away the first chapter of my book for free. And, my publisher hates me when I say this, but I say, you don't need to buy my book, right? If you just download the first chapter, I outline the full 7 steps to a sale. If you do nothing more than just grab those 7 steps, put what you currently say into that, you'll realize there's some things that don't fit. Well, you shouldn't be saying that to clients. So don't figure out how to fit it in. Secondly, you'll realize there's some pretty gaping holes, which is generally around asking the right questions and telling great stories. If you do nothing more than that, you'll double your sales in the next 60 days, right? So because I share that quite frequently, people will download the first chapter and they'll just go and implement that into their business, right? So because of the fact that I now know how to do things like reach out through podcasts and social media and make digital interactions, my business is, things are doing great. Now, the truth is that, I earn a small portion of my income. I mean, I'm listed as one of the top 50 speakers in the world, and Big Speak lists me as one of the top 10 sales speakers in the world. They're one of the biggest bureaus in the world, which is funny considering I'm introverted, but I think it adds a lot of credibility to the fact that introverts, first thing, by the way, most of the leaders in the sales field, even Zig Ziglar was an introvert. Right? It's just we believe that we can't. But I do speak. So obviously that industry has been decimated. Now, that means that, yes, I've had to reschedule events, but a lot of them I've said, well, I mean, what's the difference between me doing this? We're having a dialogue if there's 20 people on the screen or 100 people. Like at the end of the day, people can ask questions,
right,
and I can have someone on my team moderate those questions and get me the best questions, not, does anyone in the room have a question?
right.
The thing that I find is a lot of people's brains are in spasm right now. And because of that, customers are reaching out for refunds. They're like, you can't have a refund. Well, that's going to kill that relationship. Right. So but what they're saying is, I at the moment have a problem and I don't have a solution. And because of that, they need somebody to come in and provide leadership. So what they're actually saying is, I don't know how to move forward. Now, also, people don't know how to sell right now because they think that it's a bad time to sell. Well, I mean, I even had an insurance company and they're like, well, no one wants to buy insurance. I'm like, I know. But for the last how many years have they said, I wish that I had time to sit down and pick the right policy, but I don't have time because I'm busy. Now we're stuck indoors, right? The amount of times people will say to me, Matt, look, I wish I had 6 weeks to sit down like you did and learn the process of selling. Well, now it's here. No one's doing it, right? So the thing that you need to realize is you're selling to a different mindset. You're selling to a mindset that's in spasm. And as soon as you realize that what they don't want is the sales pitch of, what do you need right now? But how are you doing? Is everything going okay? Offering them some advice and then saying, look, right now I don't expect you to want to buy, but I've had all these customers for years put off buying insurance, for instance, for so long. And, one of them, and tell this wonderful story about how somebody passed and they didn't set up their insurance for their kids. And now they're a bit worse off. So while now may not be a good time to buy insurance, right now might be a great time to decide what you want to buy. So when things go back to normal, you know how to make the right decision, right? The key thing that you need people to understand is that you need to adapt and pivot.
Right.
But then when you do that, I mean, brands are dying right now, but there are other brands that will last the test of time and are truly getting an advantage. And it all comes down to how you're interpreting the current situation.
What's happening, Life Nation? Michael Levis here. This is a time to do the right thing, not the profitable thing. I'm giving away COVID-19 business strategy sessions for free. I promise to give you my honest advice and coach you on a strategy that I feel would be best for the longevity of your business. I'm not asking you for your money, but in the interest of being able to help as many people as I can, I am asking you to be ready with your 1 to 2 specific questions so we can jump right into it. Go to michaellevis.com/coaching and simply schedule a call on my calendar. That's MIKEOLIVAS.com/coaching. There's a lot of entrepreneurs right now going through having to let employees go. The morale is down, of course. They're worried if they're going to be able to keep their doors open. We all know these loans, whether the payroll or the EDIL, are likely not going to happen immediately, which just, I'm not an economist, but the reality of it is some of them are going to have to shut their doors because they're waiting on the waiting game, right? And it's nothing to do with, unfortunately, their fault right now. Things they can't control, which CEOs and owners are used to being able to control their destiny, whether it's sales, whether it's marketing, whether it's knowing their cost per acquisition and how much money and revenues are necessary to create cash flow. That's out the door right now because the strategies around the fear of the unknown. What kind of advice would you give or tips, to business owners out there going through this to keep that positive mindset? For example, one of those was a great sound bomb that you mentioned, by the way, Matthew, on understanding you're selling to a different mindset. But what kind of advice would you give specifically to some of these business owners that are going through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's an interesting time, and I'm not going to say a terrible time because there are certain people that are absolutely prospering right now. And, I did amazingly well during the 2008 recession, which was also another
Yeah,
tough
same
time.
here. Yeah.
So the thing that I would suggest is, I mean, let's face it, when the 2008 recession happened, people could still go out and sell. People could still go out and move their businesses forward. And a lot of people that are stuck in the offline world think that they're dead in the water. Like the amount of people are realizing, oh gosh, I don't have a LinkedIn profile. I don't actually know how to communicate with my clients. There are retail stores that have been processing credit card transactions on Square, but never sent their clients an email, even though Square is collecting email addresses. But the truth is, small businesses statistically have 21 days of money left in their account from I am not earning money. And they've just been locked in for well more than 21 days. So that is a terrible situation. So there are things that you have to do. The first thing I want every business owner to realize is that they need to still be there after the recession, after the lock-in, whichever one you see as being the reality for you.
Sure.
Now, what that means is that you have to make decisions to make sure your business is still there. Now, sure, that may mean that there's a few contractors that you're working with that you might have to stop working with for the short term. It might mean that you have to let go of staff, but again, I'm not a funding expert, but I know if you get them back between now and June, you still can access the funding. So you can pause payments as opposed to letting people go, because those people you spend a lot of time training. So you may not necessarily want to let them go because it's going to cost you time and money to get new people back. But your business, you have to make decisions to make sure the business is still there, because you're not helping anyone if you're going to run yourself into a brick wall in 30 days if we're going to be locked in until the end of May, for instance. And that may actually happen. The second thing is that you need to realize that there are places to spend money and places not. For instance, a lot of people are still spending money on things that are about making transactional deals today. And that is less likely to happen. However, there are going to be a huge number of opportunities as soon as we get out of lockdown, and there's going to be the companies that survive will have less competition. So that's a huge advantage. So if you ask me what I'm doing, I 100% cut costs that were associated with short-term gains, but I actually doubled down on the long-term setup of my business. So, I'm at the moment writing my second book, which will be out in January.
Awesome.
But I doubled down on the web development associated with that, the content creation associated with that, anything that was associated with what the world looks like in 6 months' time, or even 3 months' time, I'm doubling down on. Short term, I've said, oh gosh, okay, this is what I need to do here. Can I reallocate the resources that I'm currently spending money on to help me with that long term? And if the answer is no, then again, thinking like a business, I have to say, look, sorry, I can't spend money on you right now, but as soon as we're out of lockdown and the economy recovers, that's exactly what I plan on doing.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And I'm glad that you mentioned that. As far, I mentioned in my top 10 podcast that episode I did on my own, just what to do now with small businesses, and definitely resonates with what is short term and what's long term, what's necessary and what's not right now, right? And I think that it also helps business owners like, man, shit, I got a lot of stuff I don't really even need. All these subscriptions that I'm going through my P&L, right? Like I don't even need some of these things, and so it's really understanding. Like, let's talk about short term, long term, really quick here, guys. If you're listening, short term advertisement, PPC is probably not necessary right now. Long term, reinvest into SEO, reinvest into content creation, things that are going to put you in a position where when the doors open, you have a plethora of potential and great leads that you built a relationship with, right? That just shows that you actually give a shit, that you're talking to them on a date, not about just business, but like Matthew's talking about, just asking them and clients and customers and refunds, like, how are you? How can I help? I know there's a lot going on right now, and realizing that they now have the time likely to put more time and effort into your service to make those right decisions. And so great advice, Matthew. I really appreciate that, because I think a lot of people are just thinking, let me shut down and just wait. Those that are strategizing are going to come out of the end of this tunnel with so much more and flourish so much more in business. And that's exciting. And that's what the message that we want to deliver to our listeners.
Well, I think one of the important things to highlight is, Abraham Lincoln once said, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree. I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the saw, right? At the moment, we are in lockdown, right? Consider that you're sharpening the saw time. Now, there are things that, let's face it, so many businesses have built a business based on, sounds like a good idea today. Oh, we've got customers. Oh gosh, we're not making as much profit. Oh gosh, why don't people take me seriously? Why am I competing on price? Why not take this time to work out what your unique message is? If you go to a networking event and still call yourself, by your functional skill, if you're still trying to compete as a copywriter when there are a million copywriters advertising on digital online, you're nuts. You've got to spend the time working out what is my unique differentiator. The amount of time, my book at the talks about the 7 steps to the sales process. The last chapter says, if you're a business owner, there is a lot you can do to remove all the heavy lifting of the sales process, right? If, I tell this story about this girl that's a language coach and how she was struggling to get, clients because she's now competing in a global economy. And, people in China are willing to do it for $12 an hour. She needed 50 to 80. And now there's technology, I'll do it for free. Yeah. So what we did is we helped her realize she did all these things outside the scope of her functional skill for two executives being relocated to China. We called her the China Success Coach. We partnered her with executives being immigration attorneys that were working with people to get visas to be relocated to China. She now pays a $3,000 commission to these attorneys for a successful introduction, but she sells a $27,000 program. I mean, the executive's terrified to go, the organization's motivated to pay, and the attorney has recommended them. It's the easiest sale in the world. That's awesome. Like if she had this lockdown time, if you're listening to this and you still are commoditizing yourself, spend that time to turn yourself from I'm a language coach to I'm the China Success Coach. I'm the rapid growth guy. I work with this niche like mine, the introverted service provider. Then when you get to the sales process, people see you as the only logical choice. And then sales should be as much of just getting the customer to follow the bouncing ball. Right now, sure, you can do that in networking and lead people to a sales conversation. These days, with the right message, the right niche, and the right stories, you can get people to chase you from all over the world through digital interactions as well. But not if you're still commoditizing yourself, and not if you don't have a message that inspires people to care enough to work to get in contact with you as opposed to speak to their neighbor.
Yeah, no, great time to rethink, rebrand, or focus on that niche and carve it out. Carve it out what's your specific, and you mentioned something I think I really like, which is what is my unique differentiator, right? Like that's some questions definitely you should be asking yourself. Before I jump into my final question here, Matthew, where can people find you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously you can type my name into Google and I come up everywhere. Obviously, I'm repaying the debt that YouTube gave me. So you can definitely find me on YouTube and a bunch of videos there. I also post a ton of content on LinkedIn and Facebook. So feel free to reach out to me there. But for the people that are at home, I would suggest you download the first chapter of The Introvert's Edge at theintrovertsedge.com. And that'll allow you some time to sharpen that saw why you're sitting at home right now. And as I said, the first chapter is free. Or you can go to matthewpollard.com/growth, which is a 5-step exercise that I give away to help people create that unified message and discover their niche of willing to buy clients. So that way, when you get to the sales process, you want to work with you. You just have to not mess up the sale, as opposed to people that just see you like everyone else, which is still going to lead you to a price conversation.
And out of all your successes and failures, what's the one piece of parting advice that you'd give to the business and life listeners today?
I think that Robert Kiyosaki talked about that most entrepreneurs, or the reason why there aren't that many entrepreneurs in the world, is because a lot of people aren't ready to get started unless all the lights along the way are green. So for me, my biggest piece of advice that I try to give people is to start the journey. Especially for a lot of people right now who are maybe listening to this podcast for the first time because maybe they were laid off work and now they're like, well, I'm stuck in this position. It's going to be hard to get a job. I may as well start my own business. It's really easy to get stuck in this mindset of, procrastination because you're trying to know all the steps, the entire journey. What I would suggest is you get started. And when you get started, a lot of times by the time you get to where that light that you don't know how to pass is, secondly, you'll realize you turned left and you're on a completely different road. But more often than not, that information will come to you because you learned how to ask smarter questions along that journey that meant that light turned green along the way.
Awesome. Matthew, thank you so much for dropping some knowledge with us and joining us today.
My pleasure, mate.
Life Nation, you got to remember that in order for things to change, you must change. And in order for things to get better, you must get better. You just got better by hanging out with me, Michael Liebus, and the Business and Life Nation. So come back tomorrow because I'm here dropping sound bombs 7 days a week, baby. If you'd like to subscribe, please do so you can take action and execute. See you tomorrow.